I agree with you 100%. And you said something that's important. You said resilience is a choice. And I 100% agree with that. And I say that all the time. I say you're only as resilient as you think. You're committed to something that you want in the future, like this amazing relationship with your kids, this amazing lifestyle, right? You're in that process of committing to that.
Being a dad is one of the most rewarding roles we will ever have in our lives, but also can be one of the most overwhelming, where we find ourselves facing the pressures of juggling the demands of our family, careers, and life. This show will feature industry experts in mental health, social services, and personal development, along with resilient dad role models whose stories of overcoming the challenges of parenting get a new vision for the life you and your kids deserve. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico, and this is the Resilient Dad Show. Hey everyone, welcome to season 2 of the Resilient Dad Show, where we'll be taking you on a journey of self-discovery and leadership and guide you to a life of prospering with fulfillment. Today, we have the pleasure of having PJ with us, who is an award-winning and international speaker and resiliency expert, teaching people to embrace and live the resilient way. He's delivered more than 4,000 presentations in his lifetime and is considered one of the world's leading authorities on resilience and overcoming obstacles. Despite his disability, which was expected to take his life at the age of 7, he chose to live and live well. PJ truly lives an extraordinary life, skydiving, skiing, aquajetting, and the list goes on. PJ, welcome to the Resilient Dad Show.
Thanks, brother. I'm super glad to be here. And I love what you're doing because dads need that level of support. So often, men don't ask for help. So it's nice that you're putting it out there, like laying the plate on the table and then stepping back and allowing people to eat from it what makes sense for them or what feels comfortable for them and safe for them. So I love what you're doing. The world needs good men in it. And I definitely see you as leading that brigade.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. It is an honor and something that I see as a huge mission that I love to be a part of and can contribute as much as I can. Because as you said, we need as many good leaders as possible. And if I can contribute in any way, it's a life worth living and a fulfilled life. So
yeah. And you're leading, and by doing that also, I feel like you're setting a really amazing example for your children. And then the dads that listen to you then get that sensation or that feeling, and then they become better dads and better role models for their children. So just one podcast helps to make the world a better place.
Yeah, definitely does. Definitely does. So PJ, can you start with telling us a little bit more about yourself? Like you were expected to only live to the age of 7, and you've lived way beyond that, and you've achieved some extraordinary achievements along the way. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey to how you've become this resilient person and expert in the field?
Sure. It's kind of funny because I've been speaking literally since I was 7 years old. I've been on television, on radio. I've been in magazines. I've been on newspapers. I've been on stage, local television, national television, all of this since I was 7 years old. And wow. I never realized that I was representing the resilient way. And I was talking to a friend of mine some time ago, and I was like trying to figure out, like, what do I actually do? What do I actually talk about? And I was like, I said, I'm sort of there. And she said, well, where are you? And I said, well, I know that I help people overcome obstacles. And she's like, yeah, I mean, that sounds like resilience. And I was like, yeah, that's the word. And she goes, how can you not know that? And I was like, I never thought about it before. And then I talked to some of my other friends, at some point back. And they're like, yeah, every time I think of you, I think of resilience. I'm like, you do? Because I've been disabled my entire life, so I don't know. I've just always said, that's what I want, and I go after it. Despite the physical disability, despite the difficulty, I find a way to make that happen. Why? Because I want to live. And by wanting to live, it changes the way I interact with the world. And I don't carry the wheelchair with me. Obviously, it goes with me, but I don't carry it with me emotionally and psychologically. So think about this. I don't carry the weight. I don't carry the burden. I don't carry the limitation. I don't carry the belief system of the disability. I just say that's what I want and that's where I go. And then I find a way to make it happen. Um, and that has really historically been the process of my life. And so I really feel like, because I'm that guy who lives every day having to be resilient just to roll over in bed. Like in 2019, I got some kind of virus and I lost 85% of my physical strength. I lost the ability to roll over in bed. I lost the ability I couldn't even cover up when I first got sick because I lost so much physical strength. And when I say I couldn't cover up, I mean with a sheet, certainly not a blanket, because it was too heavy for me to roll over. So I would literally get stuck. I forgot how to use my bed. I forgot how to drink from a straw. Like I just lost, I couldn't even kiss anymore. I couldn't even purse my lips. And I had to retrain a lot of that. Like I had to figure out how to use my bed. I had to figure out how to be able to cover up. Everything changed in my life. But you know what? It was one of those things where when you're put in that situation, you find a way. And what do you find a way towards? You find a way towards either what you believe is your limitation and you quit, or you find a way to what it is that you really want. And you force yourself beyond the limitations of what the body is expressing in that moment or the emotions are expressing in that moment. And you say, nope, I'm not listening to any of that, because out there is what I want. That lifestyle is what I want. This is the way I was brought up. My mom didn't, she didn't let us say can't. She would always say, can't doesn't live here. Find another way. Keep trying. Don't quit. So that's like the spirit that I live with and always have.
That's it's amazing that your mother didn't allow you, and what a great gift to give you from such a young age, to not give up regardless of your circumstances, to always find a way. And
you know that there's research that shows that parents who praise their children for doing a good job, those children, it was a 20 plus year study, those children went on to not be as successful as children that were praised for trying. Because if you're praised for doing a good job and then you've never done it before, your brain goes, oh, what happens if I can't do that? What happens if I fail? I'm not going to get the praise. Now, you don't consciously think I'm not going to get the praise, but there's that fear of failure. But if you were praised for trying, if you keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, what you do is you chip away what no longer belongs. You chip away what doesn't work. I always say this, I say, I'm not defeated. I'm just discovering. I'm not defeated. I'm just discovering what's working and what's not working. I cast away, toss away the things that don't work, and I embrace the things that do work, and I keep moving forward. So you're not defeated. You're just discovering.
That's it. Like, we never lose, we only learn. I love putting it that way. And that, it's a choice. Resiliency, I see it as a choice. We have an option to be resilient and keep trying, regardless of our circumstances or the amount of times that we've, attempted it. But as long as we keep trying, that's the main thing. And I think, just having that ability to instill that in a person is a true gift.
I agree with you 100%. And you said something that's important. You said resilience is a choice. And I 100% agree with that. And I say that all the time. I say you're only as resilient as you think. You're only as resilient as you think. Right. And then I always follow it up with, because resilience is a choice. Now, here's the thing. What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about what you're committed to? Or are you thinking about what you're resistant to? Right. And the thing is that you're committed either way. You're committed to something that you want in the future, like this amazing relationship with your kids, this amazing lifestyle, restarting a romantic relationship, improving your relationship with your former partner, your former spouse, your children's mom, right? You're in that process of committing to that. And so resilience is born from commitment. The question is, what are you committed to? Are you committed to making life better and relationships better and being that role model that you want to be for your children? Or are you committed to the angst and the frustration and the irritation of your former spouse? Are you committed to the anger and the sadness and the hurt and the wanting to get back at her and wanting to have your voice heard? Like, if you're committed to all this crap back here, you're not going forward. You're being drugged back by the anchor that's pulling you underwater. So check yourself, because what you're committed to, commitment gives birth to resilience. And if you're committed to something wonderful, you're going to be resilient to get there. If you're committed to the junk, you're going to be committed you're going to be so resilient to stay attached to the crap that you're never going to move forward. You're going to be resistant to moving forward. So you're either resilient or you're resistant. Which direction do you want those to go in?
And as you're mentioning before about your mum not allowing you to ever give up at such a young age and not, using that word can't. So I see that as like a conditioning or a pattern that she was able to help create in you, which is giving you the ability to be the resilient person that you are, that even, when later on in life you've come down with an illness and you've lost all that strength in your body, you've still found a way to adapt. So that's a strong mindset that you've been able to create. Can we go into like the conditioning, in terms of the conscious and the unconscious mind and how that actually plays into creating that resilient mind, but also the patterns that we could be creating? As you mentioned before, we could be seeking to, revenge for our situation because of another person or other external circumstances. And how does our mind, which is the most powerful, thing that we actually have, how does that actually condition the way that one we behave, and also how does it operate in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. So let's look at it like this. The brain, we're going to break it down into two basic parts, the unconscious and the conscious, right? I'm going to call the unconscious it. And anytime I say you, I'm talking about you, your conscious you, your intentional you, the decision maker, not the reaction, okay? I believe there are only two kinds of people in the world. There are free people and there are slaves. Free people operate from a conscious response. They consciously choose how they're going to respond to a situation. When you're in reaction mode, remember that reaction is a slave action. You don't think about it. It just happens, right? And so when your brain, your unconscious brain drops into fight or flight and it reacts to a situation, often in the case of the kid's mom, your former partner, often when that reaction occurs, there is that, like, you bite, you fight, you whatever, something occurs, you say something or you do something, and then that's a reaction. And that reaction is a slave action because you, the conscious, you don't think about it. Remember the unconscious, it makes that decision, and then it lets you clean up that mess later. It makes a fool of you, and then you have to straighten that up with your children or your lawyer later. It makes you say and do things that you, the conscious you, are going to have to pay for at some point in the future. Yuck. Listen, there's no living creature on the planet that wants to be a slave. Every living creature, trees, animals, people, every living creature wants to be free. It wants to move in the way that it wants to move. And if you start to realize, okay, hold on, I feel like I'm in reaction mode, that's probably your unconscious mind trying to protect you from something that it projects into the future could hurt you. Even though it might not kill you, if it hurts you emotionally, that unconscious mind is going to try to take control and cause you to behave in a particular way. This is when you, the conscious you, have to say, shh, it, right? Like, meaning stop the shit, right? Stop, unconscious mind, because all you're giving me is shit that I'm going to have to clean up later. Yuck. And so when you start to realize, oh, I'm in reaction mode, I'm gritting my teeth, my palms are sweaty, my jaw is clenched, my hands are starting to go into fists, I'm getting tension in my neck, I want to fight back or yell, I want to raise my voice, all of that are reaction. All of those are reactions. So instead, if you calm down and you go, hold on, do I want to react? Or do I want to consciously choose how I want to behave? And now what we're talking about is raising your standards. What we're talking about is looking at your real values and saying, hold on, what are my real values? My values are, I believe in being a good dad. My values are, I like to treat people with kindness and courtesy and respect. My values are, I want people to see me in a way that really, truly is the expression of my authenticity. So if anybody saw me speak to my former spouse or my children, or even sit in my bedroom and cry because of my feeling of loss, it's okay to cry. Listen, man, it's 100% okay to cry. But if any of those are things that you don't like, they're probably counter to what you value. And so when you shift from this negativity or this reaction brain, you shift into the conscious you get to say it, because that's all the unconscious brain is giving you is shit. And you get to say, my values are this. This is how I want to show up for my kids. This is how I want to show up for my former partner. This is how I want to show up for my partner in the future. This is how I want to be seen by my neighbors, my colleagues, strangers. This is important. Let me say one more thing to drive this home. Anybody who's listening probably has kids, and they were little at one point. And as you all know, little kids up until about 3 or 4, sometimes even 5, just randomly throw up, right? Like you're holding them and blah. And you're like, where did that even come from? I didn't even know you were sick. Right now, you're sick because it's all over you, which is kind of gross and disgusting. The question is, when that reaction mind turns up, when that unconscious mind wants to say some crap, when that unconscious feels threatened or challenged, or like you've been shamed in some way, or you've been made to look in a particular way that is not how you want to be seen, that unconscious mind might cause you to throw up on your children. Right? Meaning sometimes dads say some stuff, and listen, moms do too sometimes. Okay. So this is not just targeting dads, but since we're just talking to the dads right now, this is my conversation with them. If you really want to be a resilient dad, you have to recognize that, if you feel sick, like if you're literally hanging out with your kids at the dinner table, or anywhere, and you feel sick, aren't you going to do everything you can to be resilient enough to hold in that need to throw up until you can get to a toilet, a sink, or a trash can, or like pull over on the side of the road and open the car door and throw up? Yeah, you don't want to do it in the car. You don't want to do it on the kitchen table. And if you're there with your children, you don't want to throw up on your children. And if that's the case, if that's really truly the physical case, don't you exercise the most amount of resilience to get to the side of the road, to get to the toilet or a trash can, so you can throw up what's causing you to be sick? The answer is yes. How often do you throw up on your own kids? Almost never. No. Physically. But have you ever thrown up on your kids emotionally? Have you ever, mostly emotionally. Have you ever said things to your kids that later on you're like, I wish I hadn't said that? Have you ever said things to your kids about their mom and said this, your mom, blah, 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 blah? When you say the word your, the problem is that all of a sudden they take on the responsibility for their mom's behavior. If you really want to be a resilient dad, you don't say your mom said, or your mom is causing this. You would say something like, hey, mom really wants you guys home a little bit early this time. Hey, mom feels like, maybe you shouldn't go on this, crazy roller coaster that I was thinking we would go on. So let's find something else to do. There's a massive difference when you choose to live by your values. That's a conscious mind kind of thing. And you checking in with your heart, getting out of the chaos and confusion of your mind. And you're saying, how do I want to show up? What's the man that I want to be? How do I want to represent parenting and relationships and connections and communication with my children? I bet it's not throwing up on them. Does that make sense? Did I go into too many details? Did I get too excited?
It absolutely makes a lot of sense. And okay. I can relate to, that, because I think a lot of the times that we do throw up on them, emotionally, it has nothing to do with them, and it might not even be related. It could be something to do with our day or work or something non-completely related to them, but because they're there at the end of the day, they're the ones that that can cop it. And I think that's so needed, the awareness of the impact that it can cause on the kids. And a lot of people, we've had, challenges, and our parents have done certain things or experienced certain things, but that doesn't mean that we have to continue that pattern. And it's our responsibility to our kids to ensure that we give them the best, life as possible, in terms of not having to drag or pass down our traumas to them unconsciously, and repeating the cycle. which is something that you see quite often. And an example to what you were saying in regards to, not throwing up your kids in resiliency, like even if your previous former spouse, is not necessarily behaving in the most honourable way that, for your child, I don't think that gives you the invitation to jump on board, because I'm big on there is no fight if you don't engage. So once you actually end it, it doesn't continue by not engaging. And I had that experience myself where I hadn't seen my son for 6 months because I'd moved over to Western Australia, and there was border closures because of COVID and so forth. But when I got back, everything was really good. We reconnected. Everything was great. But we were driving on the weekend to visit a relative, and as we were driving, he's pointed to a white ute, which I think in the States you guys call it a truck.
He pointed to what?
To a truck, a ute that was driving past, and and he was like, "Oh, there's my dad," and I was like, I thought I heard him say it, but I just asked again, and I said, "Oh, sorry." So Christopher, what did you say? And he goes, "Oh, there's my dad." And I said, "What do you mean, there's your dad?" And he said, "Well, that's my dad's car." And I'm like, "Who's your dad?" And then he explained that, he named the person that, my former spouse is dating at, even now. And he was only 5 at the time. And I tried to explain it to him, but that seemed to upset him.
Yeah.
So I had a moment where I was like having a discussion in my head. Do I continue this discussion and try and explain it to him to try and essentially, not let my ego be hurt that my son is calling someone else dad? Or do I let it go because he's only 5 years old, and me just being there present with the time that I do have with him is me being his real dad, and he'll know who his dad is. So I just dropped it, let it go, and then 3 months later, he, at 5 years old, he was able to work out for himself. He's like, "Oh, you're my real dad," and the other person is like my second dad, and I'm like, cool, that's fine. And I think that's a huge thing that dads need to understand is, like, regardless of your circumstances, the distance, the time that you're allowed to see with your child, it's being that example for them from a close or a far. Because even when you get the opportunity, if you're not that resilient father that is, going to be there present at the time that you do get, and you throw the opportunity by, like you're saying, throwing up emotionally on them because of everything you've been experiencing, you've pretty much just dropped the ball. So that's huge in terms of what you're mentioning of how to control it, and you being the actual one in actual control.
Let me ask you a question, because I think this is really important, if it's okay.
No, go for it.
When your son said, "You're my real dad," a few months later, A, how did that feel? And second, when he said, "And he's my second dad," or alternative dad, or however he phrased it, I think he said second dad. He's my second dad. What did you think? And consequently, how did you feel about that? And then how did you write those in your mind?
Yeah, I thought, what? It just goes to show that not trying to let the ego control me is the right way. And that, the kids know. And that was the discussion I was having with myself in the car before I decided to, stop the conversation, because I know that, like, that doesn't define him. What he's saying does not define whether I'm really his dad or not. I know the truth, and regardless, even what anyone else says, that's all that really matters, is what I know that is true.
Yeah.
And if I allow external, circumstances like that affect me, then I've lost all control of myself. So that's how I felt, and that's how that's what I thought afterwards.
And then when he said, "You're my real dad, he's my second dad," what was that like for you?
Oh, it's a great feeling knowing that that he knows that who his real dad is. But even when he said that, I didn't continue the conversation. I just embraced him, hugged him, and that was it. And we just went on.
I think this is an important observation for your audience, if I may, that you didn't feel any kind, or at least didn't express, you remained resilient to the comment about a second dad. A lot of dads will become, in essence, territorial. No, I'm your dad. He is your mom's boyfriend, right? Instead, you just recognize that you just hugged him and you gave love to him. So healthy relationships are when we pour out. Love never wants to stay inside. If you feel a sense of love for your children right now, anybody who's listening, if you just feel love for your children right now, does it want to stay in you or does it want to come out? It wants to come out, right? It wants to give. Love is about giving. It's not about getting. It's wonderful and delicious when we receive, but real love is about giving, right? And if we're only thinking about what we're getting, that's not love. And that's problematic. And so what I hear you saying is that when he recognized it, the second dad piece didn't matter to you. You were just glad that he recognized that you were dad and you loved him up in that moment and created that connection and that bond that said, yeah, buddy, and I'm going to be here for you. And that was it. And you were okay. You were comfortable in your own masculinity and your own relationship with your son that the second dad piece didn't bother you. And even if it did bother you, you didn't talk about it right now, which demonstrates resilience, right? Because a lot of dads would like, they would cringe at that. That wasn't you. And this, demonstrates the perfect example of, hey, let me check in with what's most important to me. I value, what are my values? I value my relationship with my son. The other piece is it's insignificant. Doesn't matter. As long as the second dad, in this case, is good to him and they enjoy spending time together, I want my son to be surrounded by good men and by good people. That's important.
Correct.
Is that fair for me to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I think, as you're mentioning before, the only reason that we allow it to take over the situation is because we fear, either not being enough or not being good enough. And being able to, allowing the you, like as you mentioned, the conscious self, know that I am good enough regardless. It's so critical. But even as an example to your kids, because I've got 3 boys, 6, 4, and nearly 2. And it amazes me at such a young age, even the 2-year-old, they literally copy everything you do, word for word, action, whatever you're doing, they want to do exactly what you're doing. And it shocked me that, wow, okay, they're a lot more aware than I thought they were at such a young age. So it's so critical for me to constantly demonstrate. And it's one of the biggest reasons why, I've made the transformation that I have and why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want other dads to understand that too, that we are the role models and the leaders to our kids. And it's what kind of leadership do we want to demonstrate to our kids so that they understand what is, in terms of a good way to be actually leading their life and living like a good human being.
Yeah. Dads offer a different kind of power. I'm going to use the word power. Dads offer a different kind of power or way of interacting with the world and people than moms. The masculine and the feminine aren't opposites. They're complements. And so you as the dad get that opportunity to demonstrate what beautiful, healthy, strong, confident, kind, generous, masculine looks like. So when I was a boy, there was this poster that hung on my wall with a picture of an Apache warrior. And in my world, I always wanted to be a warrior. I always wanted to be strong. I always wanted to be the hero. But I think all boys are like that. And I think whether you're a boy or a man in my world, or a warrior or a gentleman warrior, because there are all these different levels in my world. If you're one of these, if you're a masculine, I think there's always that desire that you want to be strong. And so I read this quote 1,000 times, and it said, there's nothing so strong as gentleness, and nothing so gentle as real strength. There's nothing so strong as gentleness, nothing so gentle as real strength. And I feel like that's what you're representing in that story that you just told about your son saying, there's my dad. And then a few months later saying, you're my real dad. And this other guy is my second dad. And the way that you responded with, you just hugged him and loved him up. That demonstrates that, because I think that all too often dads that are no longer like living with their children's parent or mother, I think they can sometimes feel slighted, and like they don't get the same respect or the same opportunities and rights that the mom might get. And so you can choose to be angry and lead with that spite, or you can say, hold on, I'm going to lead with my values. I'm going to lead with that strength, with that gentleness. And remember that leading with gentleness only means that you're even stronger. Why? Because that gentleness is built from real strength. And that real strength is resilience. It's the ability to hold your tongue. It's the ability to let go of right? The shit that the unconscious mind is causing and wanting to stir up. And it allows you to step into the conscious, intentional choices on who you want to be and how you want to show up in this world for your children, for yourself, and all of your relationships, whether it's with your former spouse or a current partner.
And what are some common patterns that you see, because even once you get to that stage, I see that there's already been a pattern formed prior to the separation, that in your marriage, those patterns of whether it's a lack of communication or ability to not allow it to engage when things are not going as well. So how do we avoid even getting to that situation where there's a separation and be able to, one, build that resiliency even in a situation where it may not be the best environment, but we have the ability to have or choose the choice of being resilient and building that before we even get to that stage, so we don't even have to get there?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm going to give you an answer that is less physically tangible, okay, and a little more cerebral. And the reason I'm going to do that is because the real problem is not in what you're doing. It's where that's coming from, your unconscious mind. Mm. So what is the pattern that I see most often, or what are the patterns I see most often? That dads get amped up in their head and they're running through like conversations and where they've been slighted and things that they want to say, and they don't feel like their voice is heard, and they still want to like fight back because they haven't been heard, and they don't seem to get a voice in the whole relationship with their children, kind of thing. And so they get amped up in their head and they show up to pick up the kids, right? Or they're with the kids, or they get on the phone or a text message with a former partner, and they say things that are intended to hurt the other person, not because you intentionally want to hurt them, but because that unconscious mind wants to bite back because it still feels hurt. And so it wants to bite back. So the pattern is that you shift from conscious intention and awareness into reaction mode. And when you shift into reaction mode, again, you wind up saying and doing things that later on you have to clean up. The unconscious mind puts you into bad situations. So the pattern is that you get in your head. The way you break that is the moment you realize that your head is starting to spin out of control and you're ruminating and you're thinking about these things over and over, and you're thinking about what you want to say and how you want to say it, and you're brain is just like, you are literally watching your brain just go over and over and over and cycle through all of this. That's the way you break that is you go, hold on, I'm stuck in my head. Let me get back in my body. Let me feel my face.
Yeah.
Let me feel my skull, my head. Let me feel my neck, my shoulders, my chest, my back. Let me feel my abdomen. Let me come back into my physical body. Let me feel my arms, my hips, and my glutes and my legs. Let me just physically feel my body, because immediately when you get out of your head and you shift into your body, you're breaking the pattern, and a pattern is just a recipe. If I teach you how to make cookies and I say step 1 through 8 and then put them in the oven for 25 minutes, when the alarm goes off, pull them out, you're probably going to make the same cookies that I'm going to make. Why? Because you followed the same recipe that I did. And if a pattern is just a recipe. So if you continue to follow that same recipe that happens inside of your unconscious mind, the conscious you follows the recipe of the unconscious mind, you will wind up having to clean up the mess. However, right, if you realize, oh, hold on, my unconscious mind is doing this, my unconscious mind, so let me shift into my body. Let me break that. Okay, breaking that is the same as, oh, you wanted chocolate chip cookies? I pulled out the chocolate chips and put nuts in them and caramel or whatever. So now the outcome is different. Yeah. Okay. And so when you shift out of your brain and you go, hold on, let me just get into my body. When you get into your body, you can then feel your heart and you can say, okay, who do I want to be for my kids? And then there's one more piece, if we want to really take it a little bit deeper, is because sometimes we're angry and we're upset. Okay. So I always say, you can't go from negative to positive very easily sometimes, especially if you're amped up, right? You've heard people say all the time, turn that frown upside down. Come on, man. Like sometimes you just can't do that. So I teach go from negative to neutral, meaning let's think about something completely different. For example, I'm a painter. I paint with my mouth. And I remember coming home from when I worked way back in the day, coming home from work after having my boss jump on me in front of some of my clients and tell me that I wasn't doing a good job. So I ruminated on what she said over and over and over all day long. And then on my ride home, I realized, oh my God, I got trapped, because I always say, think your thoughts. Don't let your thoughts think you. Think your thoughts. Don't let your thoughts think you. So I had gotten trapped in allowing my unconscious mind to ruminate. So I said, okay, let me just shift to positive. I couldn't do it. I was so frustrated and upset. I just couldn't do it. I felt so slighted. I felt so hurt. I felt a little ashamed and embarrassed. Even though I didn't do anything wrong, I still felt like that and it didn't feel good. And so I was like, oh, well, I'm a meditator. I've been meditating since I was 19. I know that the human mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So it's like, okay, let's shift and let's focus on the mountains. And this is what I mean by I'm a painter. So in December, which is when it wasn't like December this year, it was years and years and years ago. But in the mountains here in Tucson where I live turn pinks and purples and blues and these just amazing colors during sunset. So I started focusing on the colors in the mountain and how I would paint the shadows. And I don't want the shadow to look like it's just this gray line on the page. So what are the subtleties of that? I lost myself in something neutral. I lost myself in a different thought. I lost myself in a creative project. And when I did that and the bus dropped me off, when it dropped me off and I rolled off the lift, and as soon as my wheels hit the concrete, immediately I was like, oh, I'm not angry or upset anymore. And in that moment, I was able to become more positive. I was able to return to who I really am. And so you want to break that pattern. You want to get from your head to your body, from your body to your heart. And then if you want to take it that one more step that I've mentioned, allow yourself to focus the attention. Let it subtly, let your awareness settle from your heart down through your chest, down through your abdomen, below your belly button, in that space between your groin line and your belly button where your belt attaches. And in that space where your belt attaches, if you come to that place, your awareness comes to that place, you'll feel like, okay, you know what? I'm good again. I'm in my power again. Because when you're in your head, you're not in your power. You're disempowered because your brain is trying to figure it out and you're just stuck. You're just stuck trying to to wait for your unconscious mind to resolve that. Don't do that. Get back into your body. If you want to go to your heart and into that place below your belly button where your belt line is, do that. That'll change everything. So that's what I would say. That's the biggest pattern. They get wrapped up in what the unconscious mind is saying. Forgive me for being so long-winded, but I really wanted to get some depth for you.
That's a good explanation, and it's a great thing to be able to break our patterns. As you're mentioning, you might not be able to go from completely angry to positive or happy in the moment, but just giving yourself that time so we're not reactive to that situation. Because like you're saying, our conscious mind, the you, will have to clean up the shit from it because we've allowed ourselves in that moment to react. And like being able to breathe and just taking that moment just gives you a little bit of clarity that I've found in times where I'm like, okay, I'm a bit tense. I can feel it. Let me just take a couple of deep breaths, think what's actually really going on, and to have a different perspective. And that's actually helped me make that transition, as you're saying, to neutral, to then looking for the positive out of the situation. Because I believe out of every circumstance, there's always a positive. There's either a learning or there's something that you're able to gain regardless of the result. So being able to transition, and then you're not having to clean up the rubbish from the reactive unconscious mind.
Yeah. And I like that you were able to incorporate the concept of the neutral to negative, because what I heard you say is you shift from the negative into the, okay, hold on, what's really going on? And then you said, and that allows me to go into something a little more neutral and shift into the positive. And that's actually the neutral, because over here, you're frustrated and you're upset and you're in reaction mode. But when you go, hold on, what's actually going on? You're shifting into neutral. You're studying what it really is, not what you think is, not your projection, but what are the facts? Oh, these are the facts. Okay. These are the facts. Now, how do I want to respond, consciously choose to engage with those facts? How do I want the outcome to turn out? If you know what the outcome is that you want, you'll be able to get there. But if you don't know what the outcome is, you may make a mistake and turn the wrong direction. So always know what your outcome is in those situations. Even if you're struggling with your kids, right? You're wrestling with your kids, not physically, but just emotionally, and your kids want one thing and you want something different. Take that neutral. Do what you just said. Okay, hold on. What's actually going on? And then what's the outcome that I want? Okay. And then move in that direction. I would say one thing that is important, one thing that's important that virtually no one that I've ever heard talks about is the difference between compromise and collaboration. This works in your romantic relationships. This works with your relationships with your kids. And this works with your relationship with your former partner. Instead of compromising, because then somebody winds up feeling resentful, maybe not immediately, but later on down the line. Why don't you collaborate? Why don't you say, okay, what are the facts? What's really going on? What is it that they want? What is it that I want? How can we collaborate? And often this helps if you have more communication. Like, well, tell me what it is that you want and how come you want that? Let me share with you what I want and how come I want that? How can we find a mutual goal? What do we both want? And then move in that direction. If your kids are little, you might not be able to collaborate with them, but you can collaborate for them just by saying, oh, well, what is it that they want? Right. And then you're in neutral already. You're not in reaction mode. So that was beautiful. I don't even know if you knew that you did it intentionally, but I don't know if you know that you did that, but you intentionally shift into the neutral. It just demonstrates once again how wise you already are.
It's not in the way that you explained it. That's not the way that I would have consciously thought of it, but it's a great way to think of it. It's okay, how do I get to the neutral to then be able to achieve the best outcome of the situations? I love that explanation and the transition, that the example that you give. And I think it's so important, even as you mentioned with their kids, to be able to collaborate for them. It's like, okay, I know, as an example with my 4-year-old, he loves to play he always wants to play with Legos or with his Avenger toys or whatever it may be. But then he's created a mess from before. So it's okay, let's clean up the mess and then we can play, with whatever you want. And I'm achieving what I want, so I don't have to clean up his mess, and he's also able to get what he wants. But if I'm just going to yell at him and just say, no, you got to clean up your mess, I'm not playing with you, blah, 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 he's always going to be seeking that, okay, what I need to do to hide or, whatever it is so that I'm able to then achieve what I want by playing with dad. And then we get angry. It's like, well, why are they lying to us or hiding or whatever it may be? But we're demonstrating that you're going to get, told off and not necessarily guided to the thing that we need to do to repair or clean up whatever it is that we need to do. I think that's really important part that you mentioned in terms of the collaboration and not necessarily just compromising.
Yeah. Can I add to it real quick?
Yeah.
Thank you. I know I mentioned this, but I think this is a critical place to hear this again. Resilience is born from commitment. This podcast is called Resilient Dads. Only dads who really, truly want to be better dads are going to listen to this podcast. Dads that are still wrapped up in their stuff, their rubbish, right? Only those dads are not going to want to listen to this. Now, they might somehow get introduced to this and they might listen and something might like click in their brain. They might go, oh, hold on. Maybe there's another way. There's always another way. But remember, resilience is born from commitment. And so what are you committed to with your children? What are you committed to with your former partner? What are you committed to with your future partners or your current partner? Right? When you look at those commitments, the resilience that you need will be born from that. I believe that you become resilient in three simple steps. Number one, you got to let that go, right? You got to let that stuff go because it's not serving you. What do you do instead? You commit fully to something. I shouldn't have to say commit fully because that's a little bit like redundant, but I do have to say it because people don't commit fully. They partially commit. And when you partially commit, you're still dragging the anchor of your past. You're still dragging the anchor of your resistance, right? You're still attached to stuff that you don't really want. You're not fully committed. You have to let that stuff go so you can actually commit fully. The moment you commit fully, all of a sudden you'll have the energy and the confidence and the resilience that you need to get where you're going. The third step is real simple. Get excited about your challenge. Challenge, not problem, not issue, right? Your challenge. Get excited about those because when your dopamine level goes up, you think that everybody thinks dopamine is associated with feeling good, and it is, but dopamine is more aptly associated with motivation. It drives you and gets you into motion. Into what motion? In the direction of your commitment. Okay. And so if you find that you're in a challenging situation before you get there to pick up your kids, right? Or you had a bad day at work, or you're, I don't really know that I want to see my former partner, right? Or I don't know where I'm going to do with my kids this weekend. They're still so little and I don't really know how to communicate and talk to them. What is your commitment? Okay. Is your commitment that I'm just going to listen to them and ask them what they want to play and follow their lead? Or is your commitment that you have to I have to find some way to entertain them? Again, resilience that you need to get your children in the direction that you want them to move in the direction ultimately that they want to go in, and the relationships that you want to have with people. It all starts with that commitment. Commit fully to something, and then the resilience that you need will be there. You won't have to worry about it because you'll also become resourceful. When you're committed, you're by default resilient and resourceful. And remember, you don't have to know all the answers, dads. If you just listen, not just to what your children say, you just listen, not just to what your former partner says, but you also listen to what it is that you want. Your values will speak to you. And you'll say, this is how I want to be. Then you'll know the next step. Then you'll know the next way to be. You'll be able to be a resilient dad.
They're three great steps. And it's so crucial to be, like you're saying, fully committed to the outcome that we're after. We don't necessarily know all the answers, but we'll work it out. And I believe that if you really are truly committed to, we'll be guided to that one way or another. So I appreciate that. PJ, I really appreciate your time and what you've, gifted us with all your knowledge. Can you tell us, how can the audience get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, cool. Thanks for letting me share. Just type in pjswisdom.com. Simple as that. PJ's Wisdom, WISDOM, pjswisdom.com. And you can find my social media sites there, or you can, click, hey, I want to schedule a one-on-one with PJ. Cool. Let's do it. Okay. So Thank you so much for the opportunity. And all the gentlemen that are listening to this, listen, there's scales. There's a boy, there's a man, right? There's a boy, there's adult boy, there's man, there's warrior, there's gentleman warrior. What are you striving to be? Who do you want to be for your children? Who do you want to be for yourself? What do you want to create from your life or for your life? When you realize where you want to go and you actually fully commit to that, the rest of your life will work itself out. But only if you fully commit. If you fail to fully commit, you'll never get there. And you'll always feel less. And you'll know it, because you'll know, I didn't fully commit. I didn't really try. You don't have to try, right? You get to do or do not. There is no try. That's my quote from Yoda.
Thank you very much. And thank you for everything that you've shared with us and the tips and being the resilient example to the world, not only just to dads, but to everyone. And you're an example of what is actually possible, and that not to allow our circumstances dictate the life that we live. And it's always a choice to be resilient. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's my pleasure, my honor. Thank you.
And for everyone, definitely connect with PJ. I've learned so much from him from this discussion and previous discussions, and I hope you've gained value from this show. Please subscribe, like, and share with someone that you believe that would also benefit from the content, because I believe it's everyone's responsibility to support one another. And if there's someone that that could benefit from this, please do share with them. So PJ, thanks again, and everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show, and just always remember, you're more resilient than you think you are. Stay resilient. Hey everyone, I really appreciate you listening to today's show. It means a lot to me that you are part of the journey and mission to help fathers be the best dads possible. I'd really appreciate it if you review the show and share it with someone you genuinely believe could benefit from this content. Please visit resilientdad.com for more content and resources as we build this community for dads everywhere.